Yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself, Professor.
My name is Rebecca Ryan. I'm an economist and professional futurist.
Which is, what is a futurist anyway? Can you explain a little more about that?
I think the best way to sort of understand what a futurist is to think about historians are kind of professionals who study the past. Journalists are supposed to report on what's happening today, the present. And then futurists, what we do is we think about all the trends that are kind of like unfolding in the future. And we try to think about how we can give our clients like a competitive advantage to work with those trends and build brighter futures.
Mm-hmm. And so today is very interesting. You have breaking news. The NCUA board has lost 2 members to the Trump administration. And so that obviously is going to have a big impact on credit unions. And unlucky, lucky, I don't know which to call it, but gave you, real world thing to deal with today. Yep. And how does that impact what you're doing with the workshop and everything?
I mean, I don't wish this on anybody, this kind of disruption, but it is pretty awesome to be able to come together with fintechs, credit unions, CUSOs, and think together about how a disruption like this could play out. And that's exactly what we do as futurists. We think about how could this play out over time. So what we've got going in here is every team is working on either a challenging future, an expectable future, or a visionary future. And they're writing stories based on how these things could play out. So it's going to end up being, one, probably some therapy. People can think through like how this could work, but they're also getting real world exposure to how useful it is to have a process to think through the future. Because what a lot of us do with the future is we kind of like lick a dart and throw it at the wall. And we're like, we hope this is how it ends up. But foresight, professional foresight, gives us a process for going through it.
And so how does this type of scenario planning fit into strategic planning?
Yep. There are 2 phases that we do in strategic foresight that most people don't do in strategic planning. The first one we call the sensing phase, and that's where we look at all the changes that are going to come. Usually we look at society changes, so how are members changing? How is the technology changing? How's the economy of what we do changing? Environmental changes might not be as important for credit unions, but they are for some communities. And then politics and regulatory changes. So we look at those 5 categories of changes in the sensing phase. So that's kind of the first phase that's a little different. The second phase that's different is what we're doing today, which is scenario planning, looking at a range of different futures and then trying to figure out, okay, what are the things that we could control or influence that will help us, whether the future is challenging or whether the future is surprisingly successful. Because as a futurist, I don't think it's responsible planning to just assume everything's going to go great, because look what happened today, right? So you have to be prepared for like a range of futures, from very surprisingly successful to very challenging.
And so, this has been a workshop, so great hands-on experience, like you said. What kinds of questions? I've seen you answering questions. What kinds of questions are you getting from the credit union executives?
One of the questions I'm getting is, for like, I've talked to a couple of challenging tables, or like, how dark should we take this, right? And I always say, take it as dark as is realistic, because we're not trying to like be crazy Black Mirror people here, but like you really should think like, how bad could this get? That's one of the questions. The second one is how many different trends should we think about as we build the future? And I always say, look at, like, today we had a disruption. We definitely need to think about that as a factor influencing the future. But then we want to look at those trends that are very high impact and high certainty. So we gave them 7 to look at. And they're like, do we have to pick just one? Should we pick more than one? And for today, because they're doing it for the first time, I'm like, just pick one. We already have this disruption. Just pick one more trend and think that through. So those are the kinds of questions I'm getting. One other question I got is, we have leaders who don't think futuristically at all, but we have staff who know that like the credit union has to change. How do you bring those 2 groups together? And my advice there is, most people have never done strategic foresight. So people don't even realize that there's a way of thinking strategically about the future. And also, when people are afraid, they tend to contract. They don't broaden out to think about the future. So sometimes if you just have an hour-long discussion about the future, What are the plausible futures? Even something that small can kind of crack open people's awareness, like, oh, the future isn't this big, scary, unknown place. There are some things we could do to help build the future we want.